Hey, good Thursday morning to you. It's great to have you here with us again today for another Thursday morning devotional. We are just about to wrap up the series, Devotions from the Psalms. I hope it's been a good series for each of you. This amazing little book of Psalms that we have here in the Bible is a fantastic place to do devotions and meditations because all of the Psalms are designed to bring us into a closer relationship with God, to meditate upon the goodness of God, the wonder and the awesomeness of God. And what a great way to start any kind of a devotional thought as we look at some of the uniquenesses of the Psalms. We've talked about the fact that there are many Psalms that are written by David, some that are written by Solomon, many that are written by other authors that we don't even know about, sons of Korah and Asaph. Some that simply aren't identified. We looked at one of those last week. But aside from those kinds of things, just on face value, the Psalms have a great deal of meaning and emotion and power as they cause us to ponder and contemplate the goodness of God and how we stand in relationship to Him. And so today, I want us to look at another Psalm as we wind our way through just a few more weeks, and we will be done with this series and we'll start another. But today I want us to think about Psalms 139. It is a psalm of David. As I've talked about before, the inscription above the psalm will identify usually who the author is if it's known, and somewhat it will give us an indication as to what the occasion was that the psalm was written about. There's a unique inscription on this one, Psalm 139, that says David is writing for the chief musician. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but obviously it was one that was to be sung, as many of the Psalms were. The word psalm means song. And so we've talked about those kinds of things. You already know that. But as you read this, I want you to really get a sense of this one thing. And this is our point for today in this devotion. Where shall I go from your spirit? David is kind of thinking out loud as he's meditating upon God, the awesomeness of God, the all-knowing, all-reaching power of God. And he poses that question to himself, but more importantly, I think he poses that question to you and I. Where shall we go from your spirit? Well, let's just get into it today. Psalm 139, if you have your Bibles, open them up there. Rather long psalm, and so we'll take the time to read it in its entirety. To the chief musician, this is a psalm of David. O Lord, thou hast searched me and known me. Thou knowest my down sitting and mine uprising. Thou knowest my thoughts from afar off. Thou compasseth my path and my lying down, and art acquainted with all of my ways. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, O Lord, thou knowest it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it. Whither shall I go from thy spirit, or whether shall I flee from thy presence? If I ascend up into heaven, thou art there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, thou art there. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there shall thy hand lead me, and thy right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, even the night shall be light about me. Yea, the darkness hideth not from thee, but the night shineth as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to thee. For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well. My substance was not hid from thee, and when I was made in secret and curiously wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect. And in thy books all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. How precious also are thy thoughts unto me, O God. How great is the sum of them. If I should count them, they are more in number than the sands. And when I awake, I am still with thee. Surely thou shalt slay the wicked, O God. Depart from me, therefore, ye bloody men, for they speak against thee wickedly, and thine enemies take thy name in vain. Do not I hate them, O Lord, that hate thee? And am I not grieved with those that rise up against thee? I hate them with perfect hatred. I count them mine enemies. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any wicked way in me, and lead me in the everlasting way. That's Psalm 139, Song of David. This song that David writes is to the chief musician, as I said before, and some think it was written to a leader of the choir there in David's days, but there are other Bible scholars that say this is a psalm that is written as an offering up to God. The chief musician is God himself. We don't know, but we do know that the meaning of this psalm, this meditation that David has, is something that's important for us as we think about God and think about his greatness. I want you to see this morning that David is pouring out his heart to a God who he knows and who knows him. Now think about that for a moment. The all-knowing God of the universe. God is omnipotent. God is omniscient. God is omnipresent, meaning that he's everywhere. He knows everything. He's all-powerful. This great God, David meditates upon, and he's struck by the fact that God knows him intimately. And oh, my friends, we need to understand today that God knows us as well. Just look at the first few verses as we kind of walk through this. We're not going to be able to get through all of this today. Our time won't permit, but just a few thoughts of meditation from the first 14 verses or so of this psalm, I think, are significant. First of all, in these first verses, David talks about the fact that God knows us. Listen, how well does God know you? Well, in verse number 2, David says he knows us pretty well. David said, God knows when I sit down and when I rise up. God knows my thoughts from afar off. God knows when I lie down. God knows all my ways. God knows my words even before I do, even before I speak them. God is behind me. God is before me. And you see, my friend, it's not just that God knows everything. What's really significant to us is that God knows me. God knows you. He knows all about because he carefully formed you and made you. It's not that God is everywhere. God is everywhere with me. When I go out, when I come in, wherever I go, God's right there with me. It's not just that God created everything. God created me. And see, when you understand that God of creation has done a wonderful and marvelous work with you, it changes your perspective. We got a lot of people running around in the world today that consider themselves just of no account, just it doesn't matter, poor me. No, you are special because God made you as a part of his wonderful creation, and he took the time to know you. Think about who else knows you. Well, you may say, my family knows me, my parents, my mom, my dad, my brothers, my sisters, they know me pretty well. Maybe you think your friends know you. Well, not, but maybe you think it's your spouse, your husband, your wife. Well, they may know you pretty well. But does anybody know you as well as God? No wonder David concludes as he thinks and meditates about the greatness of God. He says, such knowledge is just too wonderful for me. It blows my mind. God knew David even better than David knew himself. And you know, it's true about you and I as well. God knows us to a T. As David thinks about this all-important question, where shall I go from your spirit? He asks that question out loud, and it's a question that you and I need to think about as well. Where can we go where God cannot see us? Where can we run to that God cannot find us? Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? The truth is, there is nowhere that we can go to get away from God. He is everywhere. David says in verse 8, if I go to heaven, well, that's the dwelling place of God. Surely he's there. If I go to the underworld, and by the way, in the King James Version, the word is translated hell. If I make my bed in hell. Actually, there are two words in the Hebrew language. The word Gehenna means that place of torment, that place of desolation, hell, the final judgment. But there is another word meaning Sheol. That means the underworld or the grave. And that's the word really that is used here in the Hebrew language. David says, even if I go down into the underworld, down to the grave, God is there. Verse 9, he says, if I go to the farthest part of the sea, God is there. Even in the darkness, God is there, because the darkness is light to him. Now, let me tell you, you got to understand what God is doing in all of those places. You see, for some, this is either going to be a horrible, horrible thought, I just can't get away from God, or it's going to be a comforting thought to us, to know that our God is with us no matter where we are, no matter what the circumstances of life that you find yourself in, God is there. Now, for some people who live an evil life, it is a very horrific thought. There's nowhere that I can go to escape from God. But why in the world would you want to escape from God when David says that he's there for the very purpose of comforting and protecting us? See, God is in all of those places, David says, if you read on down to verse 10 and following, for one specific reason. He says, your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. The idea is that even in all of the difficult circumstances of life, God is leading his children through the trials and tribulations of life. No matter where we are, what the circumstances may be, God is holding us in the hollow of his hand. And my friends, that's a comforting thought. Where shall I go from your spirit? There's no place that I can go that God won't be with me. And so that tells us that when we walk with God, we are never, ever alone. He's with us, holding us, leading us. He's always there by our side. And then we get to the most famous part of this particular psalm, Psalm 139, verse 14, where David talks about this idea. He reminds us that God has known us from the moment of conception. He talks about how God knitted him together in his mother's womb. And then in verse 14, where David talks about, I will praise you, O Lord, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. There's a lot of conversation that goes on in this world today about the rights of the mother and the rights of this and that. And people that are pro-choice feel that abortion is just something that the mother has a right to do. And if she doesn't want to be bothered with that baby, she can just, do away with it. But this verse here in the Bible gives us a very different perspective on that whole process. David seems to indicate that God knows you. He knows me. He knows us from the moment of conception. David talks about how God knitted him together in the mother's womb. He says that I will praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. The God of all knowledge and all care and all concern cares about that human life from the very moment that it is conceived in the womb. It speaks to the fact that God knows us before we are even born. God knows us from the moment that we are conceived and developing in the womb. Some people argue of the right of the mother but we also need to consider the right of the unborn. God sees that individual from the moment of conception, and God has a plan and purpose for every human life. This psalm demonstrates that God sees the life even there in the womb. And so, my friends, there's much more that time won't permit us to talk about in this intricate and very beautiful psalm as David contemplates the goodness of God, the wonder of God in all his creation. But maybe we'll take another opportunity to talk about this a little bit further as we wind up our series here. But we need to ask the question, what is this psalm really trying to tell us? What is this psalm all about? I hope that you'll see that it's about God's love all the time and in all places, his all-encompassing personal love for each of us. It's about God's presence everywhere. Everywhere we go and in everything we do, God is right there. It's about God's actions. He's leading us and guiding us. He's holding us in the hollow of his hand. And so when we consider these truths, I hope that we can say like David, I will praise you, O God, for I realize that I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Well, my time is up. Appreciate you being here with us today for another of these Thursday morning devotionals. Want to let you know that we are continuing in this series for just a few more weeks, and then we will be done with our devotions from Psalms, and we'll start a new series. But I hope that this has been encouraging and enlightening, that it has helped you along your way, especially as we go through these difficult times of the pandemic and social distancing and being isolated. It gives us great comfort to know that our God is right there with us. He knows what we're going through, and in his own way and in his own time, he's going to bring us through. And so let's be comforted by the words of the psalmist, and let us continue to encourage one another. Listen, we're here at the Pinnacle Church of Christ, living and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And if there's anything that we can do to assist you in your walk with God, that's what we want to do. We're here in the office each week on Wednesdays from 9 a.m. until around noon. You can call us at the church office. If there's anything that we can do to assist you or to help you in any way, that's what we want to do. Also, we want you to know that we have all of our online content available for you, not only on Facebook, but also on YouTube. You can find the videos of our Wednesday class discussion, our Thursday morning devotional that we are on here. We also have a new feature. On Thursday evenings, we are having a live video chat session, just a time when brothers and sisters can come together and we can see each other's faces. We can talk to each other about things that are going on in our lives, just kind of catch up with one another, just a time of fellowship. It's really easy to do. You just pop in. There's a video link on our Facebook page, and you can spend 10 minutes or you can spend the whole hour there with Jackson House as he hosts our Pinnacle Thursday evening video chat session. So I hope you'll come out and take advantage of that. I think it'll be a lot of fun. Whatever we can do to help you in your walk with the Lord, that's what we want to do here at the Pinnacle Church of Christ, where we're living and sharing the good news of Jesus Christ. And so until next time, God bless you and God keep you is our prayer. High five, everybody.